The Love Story of Robert and Elizabeth, A Tale of Courage and Destiny. It was the spring of 1917, and Robert St. Clair was a young man in his early 20s, full of promise and a sense of adventure. Born and raised in a small town in Ohio, he had always been eager to see the world beyond the confines of his quiet life. When the United States entered World War I, Robert, like many young men, felt compelled to enlist in the army. His heart was filled with the hope of serving his country and making a difference, but he had no idea that the real journey of his life was about to begin. Elizabeth Hargrove, on the other hand, was a woman of resilience and determination. Born into a family with a legacy of service, she had grown up with stories of her father and brother's sacrifices. Elizabeth's beauty was not just in her appearance, but in her strong, independent spirit. She worked as a nurse at a nearby hospital, volunteering her time to care for soldiers returning from the front lines, even though the war was still far away from the small Midwestern town. The first time their paths crossed was in the autumn of 1917 at a local fundraising event for war veterans. Robert had returned home for a short break before his deployment. He didn't expect much from the event, just a few speeches and a chance to see old friends. But as soon as he entered the crowded ballroom, his gaze fell upon Elizabeth. She was standing near the entrance, greeting guests, her kind eyes scanning the room with a warm and genuine smile. Her beauty struck him immediately, but it was her poise and the way she carried herself that held his attention. She was not like the other women he had known. She was strong, purposeful, and somehow in the chaos of the evening, she seemed to glow. Robert felt a pull, an inexplicable connection, and before he knew it, he found himself walking toward her. She noticed him approaching, and with a graceful nod she greeted him, her voice soft but firm. "Good evening, sir. You look like you've been to the front lines already," she joked, sensing his military bearing. Robert chuckled, feeling at ease with her right away. "Not quite yet, but I'm about to be. I'm Robert St. Clair." "I'm Elizabeth Hargrove," she replied, shaking his hand. "Are you here to support the veterans?" "Actually, I'm just here for a brief respite before I head overseas," Robert explained, "but I'm glad to see so many people gathered to help those who've already served." The conversation flowed easily after that. They talked about the war, their families, and their hopes for the future. Robert admired Elizabeth's strength and her deep understanding of the sacrifices being made by soldiers and their families. Elizabeth, in turn, was drawn to Robert's quiet confidence and the sense of duty he carried with him. They found themselves walking outside together after the event, the evening air cool and crisp. "Where do you think this war will take us?" Elizabeth asked, her gaze fixed on the stars above. Robert hesitated, unsure of how much he should reveal about his own fears. "I'm not sure, but I know it's something we have to face, no matter the cost." Elizabeth nodded, her hand brushing against his. It was a fleeting touch, but it sent a shock of warmth through his body. He knew at that moment that their connection was not something that could easily be ignored. Over the next few months, they kept in touch through letters, their bond growing with each word exchanged. Robert's letters were filled with stories of his training, his thoughts about the war, and his dreams of returning home one day. Elizabeth's letters were filled with encouragement, hope, and the quiet strength that Robert had come to admire. They shared their thoughts, their fears, and their aspirations, building a foundation of trust and affection. But as winter turned to spring, Robert received orders to ship out. The day before his departure, Elizabeth met him at the train station. They stood together, both knowing that their time was short, but neither willing to say goodbye without expressing their feelings. "I don't know what the future holds, Elizabeth," Robert said, his voice thick with emotion, "but I know I will never forget you. I don't want to leave without telling you how much I care for you." Tears welled up in Elizabeth's eyes as she reached for his hand. "I feel the same way, Robert. I don't know what will happen, but I want you to know that no matter where you are, you'll have my heart." They embraced, and in that moment, time seemed to stand still. Robert boarded the train, leaving Elizabeth behind, but their love was now etched into both of their hearts, an unspoken promise that would carry them through the hardships to come. The war was long and brutal, and Robert's letters became less frequent as he moved from one battlefield to the next. Elizabeth, though anxious and worried, continued to send him letters, always hoping for his safe return. And Finn,